I would like to welcome everybody to a quick overview of the DMARC Report interface. What we'll do is we will start by adding a domain. There's a new domain wizard, and inside of the new domain wizard, there are certain options. Aggregate and failure reports are configured by default. You can select not to get the failure reports by selecting the failure reports button. And you can also include MTA STS reports if you'd like. In this example, I am going to leave MTA STS reports checked, and we're going to move through the process. So you'll add your domain, domain.com, click Next. The first thing that you'll see is that there is a current record already in existence for domain.com, and we have highlighted the changes that our system would do in order to insert that to not disturb your current configurations. Or if you're going to replace your current configuration with DMARC Report, you can go ahead and select Replace with New Record. We're not in control of domain.com. It's just a placeholder example. But from here, you would copy this record, and inside your DNS, you would create a text record with _DMARC and then yourdomain.com. So this is a DMARC text record. And it says here, I've gone ahead and I've created that text record inside of DNS. DNS is not something that I can show you simply because we don't control domain.com, nor do I know specifically what type of DNS you will be using, but your DNS provider should have that information for you on how to set up a text record. From here, we click Next, and then there is a MTA STS policy. This MTA STS policy is the current MX record for the domain. We'll leave this policy in testing mode, and we'll say that it's valid for 1 day. I'll go ahead and I'm going to leave these defaults, and MTA STS is an advanced feature. By default, you probably just want to use regular DMARC, and then once that's working, you can configure MTA STS. And then from here, you'll go through and do a very similar configuration. You'll be adding a CNAME record inside of DNS. This is where the CNAME will point to. You'll add a text record under this host name. You'll add this record. Again, you'll create a text record, add that host record. And once those records have been created, your MTA STS policy should be successfully configured. By default, all domains are not activated, and you'll see here that the domain.com is not active. As soon as we receive our first report for your DMARC, that will change to active, or depending on the DNS configuration, we will do a retry and see if that's active, but that could take a few hours for that to happen. In the overall dashboard, you'll see here that domain.com has been added, but we have no current policy that's configured, and the current policy is none, but this domain over here is not something that we're going to be able to use. It's just as an example. So we're going to take a look at this other domain that's in the account called AutoSPF. On the top, you have a drop-down list. These drop-downs will allow you to select the domain if you're not at the overview screen. And then we'll have a domain summary. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on AutoSPF, and I'm going to go to the summary. And what this will tell us is what our current SPF record is. And as you start sending more and more emails, DKIM records for the DKIM keys that have been configured on your domain start to appear inside of your report. These will take a few days to populate, and that's also going to be based on the volume of email that you send. And also, if your email is not configured with DKIM yet, these records will not populate. Here we can see in the SPF details what are the IP addresses that are actually configured to send email on behalf of this domain, and what is the volume of email that's coming from there, and whether or not that IP is in a blacklist that might be impacting deliverability. So you can see while on this domain we have authenticated or authorized thousands of IP addresses, it's really only just a few IP addresses that are actually sending. And these types of things are important during your journey to configure DMARC, because you may have SPF limitations, and it's always nice to see what IPs are sending on your behalf in one place. And then we have the inverse, which is show us the IPs that are sending on our behalf that are not inside of our SPF record. These are IPs that we should be paying special attention to find out whether or not these IPs are authorized to be sending. And if they are, perhaps they should go into your SPF record. And that will help you with your domain alignment. From here, we'll go to the aggregate report, and the aggregate report will show what the summary is for this particular domain, what the alignment is, and whether or not we're sending forensic reports, and if the subdomain itself is protected. So in the last 7 days, this domain has had 156 emails reported. 156 is not the total number of emails sent from this domain. 156 is the total number of emails that have been reported, because the way that DMARC works is that it's the responsibility of the receiving mail server to send DMARC reports back to the address that has been specified in your DMARC text record, but it is only going to be a partial view of your overall status. There is only a small percentage of receivers who send back DMARC reports, but it does provide enough information for a domain owner to be able to go through and correct their configuration so that they can progress through their DMARC config. So you'll see 154 emails were compliant, 2 were non-compliant, and then there's a graph that tracks our progress over the last 30 days to show how many compliant versus non-compliant emails. And what we're trying to do is find the emails that are not compliant and go through and see if they're unauthorized or if they're just unconfigured with SPF or DKIM. And then there's an overall geo-compliance report. And what we'll do now is we'll dig into the details of this compliant report. So you can see here there are a bunch of different search criteria that you can use in order to check to see whether or not, or to filter out your records. And then it shows you what your overall aggregate reports look like and whether or not the SPF verdict or the DKIM verdict were passed or not a line passed or a failure. More information about that is in our portal. There's some training documentation, some information that goes through what do each of these things mean. And here we have G Suite that is sending emails on our behalf that are SPF not aligned. And what this means is that the mail from header doesn't necessarily align, but we have DKIM alignment, and because of that, the emails were delivered. But it looks like there might be some email forwarding that could be happening because of the SPF alignment, and that's something that we're going to have to work through and deal with. Here, to authorize the email source, we can put in a description, and if we and from here, once we've authorized our source, that source will now become blue, and all authorized sources will group together. So it makes it easier for you as you come back in and review the tool to find out what are the ones that you already know about, who are the senders you already know about, and keep them all grouped together. Also, there's some information about what the DKIM or the SPF setup guides are for these particular domains. So you don't have to go and hunt through those. Those are for domains that we have, and if they have public setup guides for how to configure DKIM or SPF. Inside of here, we can also click on the IP address, and the IP address is going to take us to the actual aggregate report and the raw XML. This is what we're actually parsing on your behalf. This is what we're visualizing. But if for any reason you want access to the actual XML that was generated, or that generated the particular report, you can quickly access that. So we've taken a look at what the summary does. The summary provides information about the domain, the SPF, and then we can take a look at the forensic reports. On this domain, we don't have any forensic reports, but they're configured basically the same way, which is the overview report and the way that you can search. And then MTA STS, whether or not there are any issues with your MTA STS records, and these will be recorded in that interface. And then there's a PDF report that you can download. We also have timelines, and timelines will let you know about some SPF changes or DKIM selectors that have been detected for your domain when they were first detected, and provide you with progress. If you don't want to go to summary in order to find those reports, you can also scroll here to reports, ag, forensic, MTA STS, and you can also in aggregate or reports, you can upload a raw report. So if you have XML files that you have been capturing for years, but haven't had any way to process it, you can go through and upload those reports. They'll process by our system, and you can then visualize reports that you already have captured, but you have not had processed. Then there are certain tools to help you work on DMARC, DKIM, and SPF. There are generators, lookup tools. You can find similar things to this online, so I'm not really going to go through that because it's they're fairly routine. The next thing we can take a look at are alerts. I'm going to create a new alert, and we're going to call this auto subdomain. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, in the event of a new subdomain being detected, please send us an email report. And people need this because sometimes they don't have an SPF subdomain policy, and they want to be notified if there are any new subdomains that are sending on their behalf. And there are also volumetric alerts that you can configure based on the number of compliant, non-compliant emails. What number are those, and in what sort of time frame do you want to know if there are any changes? This is good if you get any non-compliance, and maybe you set that number to 20, and in the course of one day, and you can have that notify you to come back in, check your reports, because maybe you're having some email deliverability problems. I'm going to jump over Teams, and I'm going to go straight into widgets. And what the function is of a widget is we have a lot of people who are managed services providers, or people who want to integrate our reports into their tools. So we have an iframe that you can include. It's a little bit more technical, and we can add all of the different types of reports here. And I'll go ahead and I'll find mine because this one's going to be all green. We click the view button, and this over here is the iframe that you can then embed into a different web page to be able to provide you a preview of what your status is. We have people who put this into their remote management and monitoring tools so that their clients can easily visualize, or they put it onto a dashboard so that they don't need to log in to the system in order to be able to pull this information. They can just run it inside of a dashboard. Then we have teams. What is a team? A team is basically a grouping of people that you would like to share reports with. Teams have domains and members. Domains, fairly self-explanatory. What domain would you like this particular group of people to be able to have access to? And inside of the teams, who are the people that you would like to have access to these particular reports? So you enter in an email address, and it gives you options about what this particular user will be able to do. They'll receive an email, and they will get access to the DMARC report interface, but they'll only have access to one particular domain. This is very useful for people who have tens, hundreds, or thousands of domains that are listed, and they only want to give groups of people access to certain domains. Then there is white labeling. What white labeling does is it allows you to set a host name, and the host name over here then requires you to set up a CNAME record. So once you have created your host name inside of DNS, you will point your CNAME towards us, and when you log in, it'll have your logo, your business name, and your other configuration in order to be able to see the white label interface. The white label interface changes the reporting URL, and it puts a logo in the top left-hand side that is going to be different than the logo that we provide. You can put some information about what your name is over here, your time zone, your two-factor authentication, and of course you can close your account inside of there. There's also some information about API tokens, and these API tokens can be used in conjunction with the API documentation if you would like to automate the creation of domains or the reporting of domains. And I think that that's a fairly good overview of the way that the tool itself functions. The part that's we have not covered, which really is a technical component, is how to read and how to interpret these reports themselves, and what to do when you have a domain that doesn't have good alignment. There's training inside of the system in order to be able to give you that information. Hopefully this provides you with enough information in order to get started, which is to add a particular domain. And then you really do have to wait at least 24 hours before you start seeing information tracked inside of the tool. Thank you for your time.